Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Rui Diaz through the middle to crown it for Seattle!
The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is campeón!
All creatures great and small! De la Vega! ¡No me pongo de pie! ¡De rodillas!
You know, what was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder at Heart wrote a commentary that we didn't take Gold Cup seriously.
This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest. Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes on the Sounder at Heart podcast network. I am Jeremiah O'Shan. It is Friday. We are at Long Acres, and of course, I am joined by Niko Moreno and again Tim Foss of Sounder at Heart. Welcome back, guys. This is like the kind of week that this show was designed for, because I actually think we learned a lot in training this week.
Yeah, I agree, and it's been a little while since all three of us were here, so yeah. Good to congregate and have a little chat.
Yeah, more eyes, more ideas into what, one, we could potentially see on the field. Two, who are some players that might step up. There are obviously some injury updates and things that we've been able to see and hear. So, yeah, you're absolutely right, Jeremiah. This is what this show is all about.
Exactly. So let's get right into that. The Sounders are down to 13 healthy and available first-team players. They would have qualified for a extreme hardship. So even though the roster is frozen, in a normal time, they would still be allowed to have one player up from Defiance or whatever on a short-term loan. But because it's an extreme hardship, they're able to bring up as many as 3 in this case, because they're down. So it's basically how many players they need to get to 18, we found out. Or, sorry, they need to get to 16 outfield players. So they can bring up 3 players from Tacoma Defiance to play on a short-term loan for the Sounders. We were basically told they were going to use all 3 of those call-ups. All week, they've had 5. They've had more than this in and out, but all week they've had 5 players that have been training with them. Yu Sukanome, Antino Lopez, Sebastian Gomez, Leo Burney, who is technically in between because he was on a full season loan. So I should have asked, but I think he would count as one of those call-ups. And then Peter Kingston. So you've got you've got one center back.
Two center backs.
Chino and Leo.
Yes, okay. 2 center backs, a kind of a winger in Sebastian Gomez. I guess you would maybe call Sukanome an attacking player. And then Peter Kingston is more of a midfielder. He could maybe deputize as a fullback if needed. But those are all 5 of those players are interesting. We did get some clarification. Yu Sukanome is not eligible for call-up because he would require an international roster spot. The Sounders do not have an open international roster spot. So it seems like Sukanome's presence was more about maybe looking towards next year. And it seems to indicate that he's probably going to get signed to the first team, but they're giving him some early reps. So among Leo Burney, Tino Lopez, Sebastian Gomez, Peter Kingston, I don't know if you want to just let's talk about those players a little bit. Tim, you want to pick 1 or 2 of those you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think not that he necessarily is the most likely to join the group, just because of some of what we've seen in training regarding the way they're probably going to line up on the field. Sebastian Gomez might not have the best shot just because I don't know that they're really going to be using pure wingers, although I think he can function as sort of a pocket winger a little bit. So maybe he does make a little bit of sense, but him getting a call for this game would be really intriguing for me because I do think he's one of the players currently at Defiance who has, I've described it as a Snyder Brunel sort of trajectory that, like, by that I mean probably a around next summer signing, but just from a productivity standpoint in a very similar number of minutes to Georgie Manungu before Manungu was a like full-time first team player. Gomez compared really favorably from a productivity standpoint and is 5 years younger than him or something around that
he's like
range.
18, I think.
He is 18. But he's a really technical attacking player who mostly plays out wide, who's got good vision and a
high
knack
motor
for
player too.
Yeah, definitely. The Defiance during the second half of the season have used him in central midfield a bit too. So there is a little bit of versatility that was more out of necessity than anything else, but I think he's a very intriguing option. Maybe not as much of some of those other guys are more raising the floor for this game. And he probably would be, maybe he plays 15 minutes at the end of this game if he gets called up. But I think if you're already kind of locked into your playoff seating at this point, a little bit of value in kind of getting a sense of what you've got ahead of the off season. But I think he's a really intriguing prospect.
I actually think he's got a pretty good chance to be called in just because they don't have a lot of options out wide. Like they are a little flush with forwards. They have all of Osaze, Danny Musovsky, and Jordan Morris. Only one of them most likely is going to start. And so they don't really have great bench options.
Yeah.
So I think he might make sense just as a player to have in case they need another wide attacker.
Or if you're chasing a goal.
Right, exactly.
Because what we've heard a lot from Brian this season when it comes to Kalani playing that wing-back position is that he doesn't mind him in those inside channels and being a guy that can connect through. He could be a guy that gets into the 18, makes some of those inside runs. That puts Sebastian Gomez on that wide end where we've seen him here at practice. I still recall when Paul Rothrock had that hand injury, the first player they called in to replace him was Sebastian Gomez.
And that's who he kind of reminds me a lot of, actually. The way he plays strike, it has very Paul Rothrock vibes to me.
But what I would say is that I do see him comfortable when he does come inside. You know, I've seen him a couple of times play that neutral when they do the small started games where your pivots are usually your neutrals because you want to keep them constantly on the transition phase of the game. So I think that's a great call. It's interesting. I like him as a player for what I see here at training. He's a guy that maybe 2 to 3 times a week you're like, oh, that was a nice play. That was a nice turn. Those are the sort of things that I look for in a player that I'm bringing up. I'm curious to see if Tino Lopez is the guy that gets brought up because I do think that obviously best case scenario, Stu should be your first guy off the bench to replace your center backs. But if there is a need to have someone else, Tino Lopez was a guy that I was very high on about a year ago, and he sounded like he was trending in the right direction. Then he kind of fell off a little bit.
He's been hurt. He's gotten he's been in and out of his health has not been great this year, which is, I think, what's held him back mainly.
Yeah, and what I've seen in practice with him is he has that ability to be on the ball a lot, right? And that's something that this team needs because they built out of the back so much because they do need your center backs to have so much of the possession of the ball to help out on the attack, push up a little bit higher, especially if you're going to play with 3 men on the back. There is that need for one of those 3 to push up and kind of help the build up and the link up play a little bit higher up the field. So Tino Lopez is a guy that I'm curious, and I really want to see if he does get a call up to get up there. But I will, again, preface it by saying that I would much rather see Stu, a guy that it seems like he's your future center back. And I've told you this, and I've said it in a couple of shows, the kid has gained some serious muscle mass.
Yeah, he has.
It looks like he's just been in the gym just pumping. So I want to see where he's at right now, because he's always had the technical skills, always had the breaking pass ability. But now with a little bit of a broader, back, shoulders, I mean, I'm interested to see his physicality.
Yeah, he has not, unfortunately, been able to get on the field much in the last few months. He's basically missed the last 4 months where he had, my understanding is he had like a quad injury or some kind of muscle injury that he picked up while doing post-game sort of like, what do they call it? Cool down exercises?
Warm downs.
Warm downs. There you go. And so he hurt himself there, and that ended up being a kind of, somewhat significant injury. And then in the process of recovering, he had another injury. So he's putting together. He's missed 4 months essentially. Before that, he was on like a rocket ship in terms of his ascension. He was, he would almost certainly be at the U20 World Cup right now. He was probably the Sounders' best, center back prospect. He has, last year we were talking about how even last year he had probably outgrown MLS Next Pro. And the idea this year was for him to, if not necessarily get serious minutes with the first team, to be loaned out and to, be playing somewhere else competitive soccer. Unfortunately, the injury sort of like put a kibosh on that. He did get some decent minutes. He got into, I think, 3 games with the Sounders this year. He looked fine in all of those games. Hasn't gotten a start yet, unfortunately, but he has gotten onto the field a few times. And I suspect that he's going to get a significant amount of playing time in this one, just because JP probably can't, like, my suspicion is JP's going to start. That's what it looks like, is JP's going to start. I can't imagine he goes more than 50, 60 minutes at most. He might come out at half, and then I would imagine what they would do is then move Alex up to his spot and then put Stewart in. But yeah, Antino Lopez, another thing about him, he was kind of a leader with the Defiance last year. I think he was actually the team captain a lot of the time. And I like him a lot in terms of his stability. He's a good floor raiser. The other center back that they're talking about bringing in is Leo Burney, who also has struggled to stay healthy this year. He has been healthy, I feel like, for a couple months now, which is good. You look at his numbers and they haven't been great with Defiance. I think a lot of that is that he just hasn't been healthy. He also happened to be with Defiance at a time when the Defiance were awful. Yeah. Probably their worst run of results that they've had since moving into MLS Next Pro. And I don't necessarily put that on him. That was a very dysfunctional sort of team for a few months there, in part because I think we're kind of at a talent deficit.
Yeah. The Stu Hawkins note is something that I wasn't considering as much, saying that Seba Gomez might be the option. I think really it probably, because you do have Stu, probably is between one of Burney and Lopez gets the call, because you also, whether they stay in the 3-back the whole game or not, the Sounders have sort of, through the development system, gotten to a place where Hawkins is sort of in a Jackson Reagan mold as far as size and distribution ability, and to varying degrees, Antino Lopez and Leo Burney are more in the Jamar mold of, they are a little bit more athletic. Physicality is a little bit more of their game. They both can distribute some, but I think because Lopez has been a little bit healthier for a little bit longer, maybe that is the more sensible choice.
Yeah.
Even if I think the organization was pretty high on Leo Burney when they brought him in at the start of this year, and he just hasn't had as much of an opportunity to really get going.
It feels like he's been dealing with one injury or another, basically from almost beginning of training camp.
Right. And so I think maybe his ceiling is higher, but in this game from your subs, probably looking to raise the floor. And I think Tino Lopez is the better option there. And then Peter Kingston provides you with If versatility, he can play in central midfield. That's primarily where he plays with Defiance. So whether that's, if I believe he and Danny Leyva have played alongside each other,
that would make sense
a few times. If JP can only go, even if it's 45, if you make a halftime sub, you can bring Peter Kingston on to play there. He could also presumably play the Kalani Kosorienzi right wing back role. I think he gives you some options and flexibility. And set piece service too.
He's a good passer. I like that about him. I mean, he's 24. He has the frame for it. Seems like he's never out of sorts when he's with the team. I don't think there's been anything that's been brilliant that I've seen out of him, but sometimes you need those players that can be a safe bet. And he has the experience playing in USL, and he feels beyond his years at times, although he's 24, he's up there, but he does feel like a guy that you could count on. So I think all those guys could be interesting, but if I had to pick the three, it'd probably be Tino. I would like to see Sebas and Peter Kingston.
That's who I would probably be.
Yeah. Peter Kingston is also a guy that Wade Weber really likes. And if I was making a list of guys whose talent identification is better than mine, Wade Weber's pretty high on that list. So his hit rate's solid.
Yeah, his hit rate is sort of like a slept on thing. Wade Weber has overseen a very productive stretch of Defiance era. Like if you look at the number of players that are on the first team roster that have been coached for at least a season by Wade Weber, it's kind of ridiculously high.
I mean, Wade was calling his shot on Jackson Reagan and Paul Rothrock like 8 years ago.
Exactly.
So,
it's pretty good.
Yeah. And based on that, in like 15 years when they've both retired from soccer, presumably they're going to be president and vice president.
Right. Yeah. That was a common thing Wade used to tell people, is like, I think these guys are going to be president and vice president one day. So let's get into to what we actually think is going to happen with the starting lineup. There are not a lot, like I said, there's only 13 available outfield players, so there aren't a lot of options, and it kind of picks itself a little bit. Like I said, 3 of those are forwards. I don't think they're going to do something crazy like go to a 2-forward setup. So I think we can assume Jordan Morris is one of those starters. And then the other player off the bench is Stuart Hawkins, who is not eligible to start, or who is probably not healthy enough to start. You see where I'm going. The lineup kind of
writes itself.
It kind of makes itself. The question is what formation we think it is, and to me, it makes the most sense to go with the 3-4-2-1 that they started the season with. They have not played with a ton since June or so, but it's a formation that they know well. And if they do that, I would assume it's going to be Steph Fry, and then center backs of John Bell, Jackson Reagan, Alex Roldan. That's another kind of maybe surprise. I don't think it shouldn't be Alex looked very good when he played there earlier this year. I think in a 3 center back setup, it actually is kind of a really intriguing option going forward even. And then the wing backs would probably be Paul Rothrock on the left, Kalani Kosorienzi, and then it looks like a double pivot of Danny Leyva and João Paulo. And then Jesus Ferreira will probably play as the 10. And then you have
next to Pedro,
and then Jordan up top. Yeah.
I mean, without having a full strength group available, it's a pretty good lineup and a really good selection of players for that formation. I
agree.
The prospect of Ferreira and De La Vega under Morris is, if you at any point recently have been like, man, I wish they were playing more through balls for Jordan Morris.
There's going to be some of those.
Baby,
yeah.
You're going to see it. Especially JP and Danny Leyva are both very capable of playing. They both play a particular sort of clipped ball over the top for someone like Jordan to run onto, but you also have Kalani and Paul, who are absolute dogs and will make runs in behind as well. So Jordan is not the only one who has to stretch the back line. Those guys will also stretch for width and depth, which then creates more space for Jordan to run into, space for those balls over the top, and having De La Vega and Ferreira making that secondary run behind. I think it's a really intriguing and exciting setup.
I think the only I don't think their ability to generate chances should be in like this is an offense, or this is a group of players who I feel very confident will generate chances. I think the only question is how effectively can they defend, because that is a little bit more of a makeshift. There's not, Danny Leyva and JP have played together. They have had some games where they were actually really effective early in the season, but they aren't necessarily as mobile as Christian and Obed. Maybe an understatement. But they are both capable players. I think the only question for me is really how many minutes can João Paulo go?
Yeah, durability is one of the things. Discipline defensively is the other one. I think Kalani and Paul Rothrock are both guys that are going to be on the attacking end, and that they focus on that aspect of the game. So, how much can you exploit those spaces that they leave? I think that JP is the guy that you would want there because his IQ allows him to see and anticipate those pockets of space before they create. I've seen him do it consistently. I think he's going to be doing a lot of traffic control and making sure that guys are in the right spots. I think Alex does a good job at that as well in the 3-man back line. He's going to be able to close some space, but that's going to be the real question mark is how disciplined. I talked to Danny Leyva this week, yesterday, and he was talking about how communication is going to be key. And you're going to have to let somebody know, hey, I'm getting high, cover my space, which is something that in those, the stretch of games where Seattle was dropping points, that was something that I would talk to a player, would talk to another one. Everybody was like, yeah, I should have let him know that I was higher. I should have, maybe mentioned this and that. So that's going to be a key component. I'm also a little bit concerned about, the width is a thing that Kalani and Paul Rothrock both give, but you do kind of miss that the services into the box from Alex. Yes. Alex is such a good service into the 18 that, maybe Ferreira could do some of those things when he gets out on the wider channels of the game. But those are maybe that's the only thing is his services into the 18 from those white spaces might be the one and only thing that you might be missing. But I'm excited. I think you guys are right for having. You said 13 players available. Yeah. It all fits very well. And that's credit to the roster build. That's credit to the system. And it's credit to a team that next man up mentality is just a slogan unless you show it on the field. And it feels like this team has done it consistently. They've lost one game at home all season long, despite the ridiculous amount of injuries. So, that the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah, I will say that you're probably right. I don't expect this team to be throwing in a lot of crosses to the degree that they're going to be getting into the box. It's probably going to be a little bit more like cutbacks and things like that. And I will. One of the other things I was just thinking about right now was it may have ended up being a little bit of a blessing in disguise that Albert was not available for this game, because I'm sure the temptation would have been to start him next to either JP or Danny. And if we're being totally honest, I don't know that either one of them are an ideal. Like, Albert is not an ideal partner for either one of those people. He had a great, he was great at covering ground last week. I think he can do that job, but his strength is getting forward. And if he's going to be, if he's paired with either one of those guys, I think there's, I think he's exposing JP too much if he's with him, and then I also think he's maybe being asked to be a little bit more a defensive player than he should be if he's with Danny. And so I think that in some ways this is a better pairing for the whole, given everyone else.
I would agree.
And so, look, it would be great to have Albert, but I can kind of see, I can convince myself that this is better than if Albert were actually available. The one that really does hurt is Kim being out, and it does look like, and that one could be a little bit more of a concern, like a bigger concern, because their center back situation doesn't necessarily get any better next week, because next week they are playing at New York City FC. Yamar probably won't be back by then.
No, he won't.
I don't see any reason to believe Kim's going to be back by then. and so that there's no one else really other than Stu. Maybe Stu can get fitter, which would be another good option. But that's one that gives me a little bit more pause heading into the playoffs. Hopefully Yamar is ready for the playoffs. We can deal with that later. I just had a horrifying thought of going into the playoffs without Yamar, and it's like actually a pretty big concern because I don't know. We have no idea when Kim might be available. I mean, maybe he's available for the playoffs, but it did not sound earlier this week. May as well talk about this. Earlier this week, Brian Schmetzer gave an update on Kim, and he did not sound optimistic about Kim's ability to get back soon.
He struggled to describe the injury, made me very nervous.
Yeah.
The fact that he got into calling it, whether it's a swelling or an injury in the calf, a mass, and talking about blood work and all of these things was just odd to me. I don't know what the situation is, but it clearly sounds like it's a lot more complex than just a regular injury.
Well, he said he was kind of bothered by it, I think is what he said. Like he made a comment that that it wasn't a simple, like it wasn't like he just had a cramp.
No.
Or there is a like I don't know. There's something going on there that does not sound, and it sounds like it's sort of been this ongoing issue that they thought they'd worked through, and they clearly haven't. Like I think this is the same injury that basically knocked him out at halftime of the Club World Cup. Because
Kim hasn't looked good the last two games, and it's been a little bit of a mobility issue. There's that one opportunity that Portland has where he kind of like stumbles and falls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a little bit of flat-footedness, but you could tell that he's just not there with the explosiveness. I'm going to go ahead and say that that's probably a factor.
Yeah, I would agree. It is, when you start getting into using terms like mass and for a leg injury needing to do blood work, you kind of start turning towards like, well, I hope Kim Keehee is okay.
Right.
Period, not just I hope he's back for the playoffs sort of situation. Well, that was sort of, yeah. And it does start to give Chad Marshall going out in the playoffs PTSD vibes a little bit of just you start being so short-handed that
it's like you just kind of run out of bodies.
Right. And that's, a tough way for the deepest team in the league to go out.
Right. Yeah.
There's only so deep you can be.
I mean, I suppose this is where Alex Rodon center back starts to come into play. Like, I don't know, maybe he's their center back in the playoffs, which doesn't, like, I laugh, but it's not, I don't think that's, at this point, I would not be at all surprised to see Alex Rodon start a playoff game.
I don't hate that idea. I mean, I like it conceptually. It does not make me feel warm and cozy and comfortable going into the playoffs, but I think it's not a bad, there are certainly worse situations you could be in, I suppose.
Anything else about this group of players that you feel like we need to get into? John Bell, I'll just say John Bell has been sort of a underrated, he's addition. He's been able to just fill in, and he's been reliable, and he doesn't necessarily do anything to make you jump out of your seat in excitement, but he just is solid. He does his job.
I do think I don't want to harp on it too much, but this is almost an ideal set of players to have available to play the formation they're likely to play in. That I think that 3-back, particularly with Alex and John as the wide center backs, provides you with a degree of cushion with the way Rothrock and Kosarienzi are likely to play as wingbacks, but those guys are also going to get back. It just is their primary directive is to get forward and be involved. That 3-back also provides you with some ground cover help with a midfield pairing that is not your most mobile midfield pairing. That midfield pairing also is probably your best ball control midfield pair, which
this is a game the centers probably want 60% of the ball.
Yeah. And not that I think there are too many comparisons you can really draw from these two teams meeting in March, but one of the frustrating things from that game was when Jackson came in, he was playing on the right side and was pushing way up on the right wing.
That's
and
the game where he was like playing almost as a right wing, like he was like just serving in crosses, right?
Jackson's long balls are excellent, but he does not play those Alex Roldan balls very often.
Yeah.
And playing in the 3-back with Alex there, where Kalani is going to push up and inside probably, you still do have the potential to, when you are holding possession deep in the other team's half, to have Alex serve those sort of early crosses. It's, it all adds up. Not guaranteeing a win, but I think it's a group that sets up really well for this game.
And they match up well because regardless of the changes in the backfield, which I think my only concern sometimes with Jay Bell and Alex is that because they are so comfortable on the ball, sometimes they get too comfortable on the ball and it's an easy turnover. It's a bad pass. And all of a sudden you are on a bad position where you're given a soft goal. RSL doesn't have great talent up top, especially without Luna, especially without, Gozo. They just don't have that, right? Is Agata, is Seco, Victor. None of those guys necessarily make you nervous on the attacking end. So I think that Seattle matches up well in that regard. I think set pieces is where I would focus on defensively, because obviously you have a pairing there that don't really play with each other too often. So we'll see where that goes. And I feel like that's the only way that I would see RSL sneaking into this game is either on a soft turnover, on a bad part of the field, or a set piece. Aside from there, I'm totally with you. Seattle should dominate possession, dominate volume of creativity and opportunities, and dominate most parts of this game.
One other thing that I think is worth mentioning at least is that both with the first team and over the last couple seasons playing with Tacoma Defiance, there is quite a bit of familiarity with particularly that sort of back seven, essentially the 3 center backs, the 2 midfielders and the wing backs. Apart from JP, all of those guys over the last 2 or 3 seasons have all spent time with Defiance playing together. So they're like, hopefully there is that familiarity that presents itself on the field and helps to smooth some of those potential cracks.
Yeah, so let's talk about RSL a little bit more. This is a team who is currently in the final playoff spot. Is that right?
Yeah, they need this result to get in. They need a win, not a result.
Well, they're currently tied for the final playoff spot with Colorado. They have the tiebreaker on Colorado. They do have one more game after this. So theoretically, they have an out. If they don't get points in this game, they still have a chance to sneak in. But it is a big game for them. I mean, there's much more on the line for them than there is for the Sounders. But they are, like we said, they're down some notable players. Ruben Luna being the most notable. Is it Carlos Gozo?
Gozo and Brian Ojeda. Who is, a guy that doesn't just help their he's a distributor, but he's also a guy that mid-range can beat you pretty quickly. So, yeah, that's some tough guys that they're missing. I think Brian Berra might be a guy that might have to step up in some of those set-piece opportunities. But, yeah, that's a team that, look, both Alex and Brian called them desperate. And that's always, something to be mindful when, you're thinking that the team's going to come in here with just nothing to lose necessarily, just going to put all their eggs in this basket and try to figure it out.
So Diogo Gonçalves has been sort of a mercurial player for them. He was signed as a designated player. He hasn't really lived up to that billing at all. He does have 4 goals and 3 assists this year. But he seems like someone who, this is the kind of game where they'd say, look, you're getting all this money. This is where we need you to step up, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he's interesting. I don't think there's anything incredible about him. He reminds me a little bit of the way he plays the game to Costa from Portland, just not as good, I would call it, but he does have moments of brilliance. He likes to come inside. He's a creative player. I think he sees the field pretty well. I think he puts a lot of key passes in through. I don't have the statistics on it, but he feels like one of those guys that probably is up there in terms of key passes for this team. So yeah, I mean, there are some pieces there. I think that the most interesting part of this game in terms of the roster is Jedlin coming back with this team. Obviously with the background he has here, and look, he's a guy that no matter where he's been here in MLS, he still plays like Jedlin, right? He gets forward, he puts good passes in, he gives you a lot of that width from the fullback position. So, maybe he's a guy that has an inspired game, and you got to be mindful of. Yeah,
this is DeAndre Yedlin's second ever game as a visitor in Seattle. The first since 2022. He was here with Miami. Pre-Messi Miami, notably. That was the year that they were basically tanking the first half of the season to make room to make sure they could sign Messi and all of his buddies in the summer. And this was a rare win for Miami in that game. I don't know if people really remember. It was an ugly 1-0 win. I remember the video guys from Miami getting into the locker or into the elevator that go down to the locker rooms, and they just had this big grin on their face like they couldn't believe they got out of here with a win. But yeah, DeAndre Yedlin is an interesting player. It's funny to think it's been over 10 years since he last played here. A long time. And it's like he's a legitimate Seattle guy. He grew up here. He played for the Sounders Academy, played for the Sounders for a couple years, but it doesn't necessarily feel like it's been like there's a whole generation of fans that have grown up without like knowing that he was really on the team or seeing him with the team.
Yeah, it is he's one of those guys who I imagine if you were not actively following the team at the time is just sort of almost a mythic figure,
right?
Like he has the goal against Tigres, him and
his first
Jimmy Traore,
his first competitive game at Lumen Field, if I remember correctly.
And he shines particularly brightly, but even some of that is more reflective of. And then he went to the World Cup, and then he went to Tottenham and
right. And he has I think he has like close to 100 caps with the national team, which is wild because it's like he hasn't been in the national team for a long time at this point.
Yeah, but
those are different times, I guess. Pre-golden generation for the U.S. men's national team. I don't know if we have enough time, but and hopefully I don't get us too long on this because this is something that I've actually talked with a lot of fans about, and some criticize me for it, some don't. But when I look at DeAndre Jedlin, because of his tenure here and not getting a lot of the championships that others do, I don't have him in my all-time 11.
I don't think you can. To me, I think it's as easy as he just didn't play enough games here to be like
right. And just people are like, "Oh, that's crazy. He's like the best player to come out of here at that position." I was like, "Well, there's a best 11 because you did X with this team, right?"
I think he was the most promising player. Like you could put him on the list of like if you just take his whole career and you don't just look at his Sounders time, you could argue that he was among one of the more accomplished players. I just looked. He had 75 caps, so he's not going to get to 100. There was a time when I thought he would certainly get to 100, but he hasn't been called up for 2 years at this point. But whatever. This is getting beside the point. I'm with you. I always think it's a little weird when people include him in their best 11 because I just don't think he has the resume with the Sounders. Mm-hmm. There's a debate going on right now, maybe not the most heated debate, but currently you can still vote for, this is a good plug. If you are a Sounders Alliance member, you are eligible to vote for the Eternal Sounders Circle of Legends. And there are 3 people that are currently nominated for that: Jimmy Gabriel, Siggy Schmid, and Casey Keller. And Jimmy Gabriel is someone who has been involved. He's nominated as a builder. He's been someone who's been involved with this team literally since the NASL era. He's very influential in terms of like kind of guiding the Sounders to where they ultimately.
And Brian talks about him all the time.
Yeah, Brian talks about him like he's the most important, maybe probably the most important person in terms of shaping Brian as a head coach. Siggy Schmid was, of course, the head coach for I believe 7-8 years, the first 8 seasons, parts of 8 seasons. Very successful. I don't think that needs a lot to be said about him. But I bring it up because Casey Keller only played here 3 years. But the difference between Keller and Yedlin to me is that so Keller obviously has this amazing resume. Mm-hmm. He at one point he was maybe the best goalkeeper in the world.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people sometimes forget that. He was an amazing goalkeeper. The heights of his career are maybe higher than any American ever. But that was not necessarily when he was here. But the thing is that when he was here, he won. He was the team. He was the team captain. B, they were very good. They made the playoffs all 3 years. They were competitive all 3 years. They won the U.S. Open Cup all 3 years. He won a goalkeeper of the year. Mm-hmm. And honestly, the other element of it is that his signing to me may have been the most important single signing that the Sounders made in 2009, because it sort of sent this message of like, no, we're a real soccer team and we're bringing in this literal legend. Like, this is like, just to give you a little anecdote, in 2006, my wife and I went to, we wanted to be in Europe during the World Cup. And the player that she fell in love with was Casey Keller. And so she sort of had this like love affair, relatively speaking, with
platonically
with Casey Keller. And so, but that's the sort of like, that's the myth. That's like the mythos that he had around him. And so bringing him into the Sounders was this very clear message of like, no, we're a real serious soccer team. I remember when I came to Seattle the first time when we were interviewing for her program in early 2009, they had these banners that were hanging off these buildings. And the one that we immediately recognized was like, oh shit, Casey Keller is playing here. And I think it did kind of, and then of course he was the broadcaster for over a decade, a colored commentator for over a decade. And so and I know there's been some debate as to whether or not he really belongs in this.
He absolutely belongs.
I think he 100% belongs. I don't even think it's a question. I was actually taken aback when I heard a few people telling me like, oh, I don't know if Keller belongs.
He was the first big name that I thought the Sounders signed.
He was, yeah.
As someone who clearly was just starting to get into MLS when the Sounders came onto the picture. I had seen obviously previously where I was a casual watcher because of Valderrama, Diablo Echeverri, and you follow it in a very minimal way. But when they brought in Casey Keller, I was like, wow, that is one of the best in that position at one point in time, right? I mean, you obviously knew of Casey Keller before the Sounders, and I was just like, man, that is a big, big get.
I think one thing, and I agree, Casey Keller should be a lock for this. And sort of a parallel where I also agree, I don't think DeAndre Yedlin is an all-time best 11 right back, just because what he did with the Sounders is not enough to get him there. He did win. He was on the 2014 team, but wasn't like the guy.
No,
I think the parallel sort of between Casey Keller and DeAndre Yedlin is not only did Casey Keller come to the Sounders as a legend of the game, but it was also this sort of first step to a certain degree of like the Seattle Sounders will have Seattle roots, or, the greater Puget Sound, that Casey Keller is a local guy. That is important. DeAndre Yedlin, in a similar way, is sort of a herald of what the next decade of the Sounders is going to be. We are going to continue to build through local roots, but local roots that come through the club. That there is plenty of fair debate over whether DeAndre Yedlin is a Sounders developed guy, but he was that first
wave. He was like in the same way that Jordan Morris and some of these early, like the earliest academy players are. It's like, okay, I don't know how much the Sounders can really claim as being developed, but like people who were involved in the Sounders did play significant roles in developing. I mean, Darren Sawatsky is a great example of a player, of someone who was involved in the Sounders and had a huge role in developing some of these guys before he was with the Sounders, although he was, a former USL player as well. But yeah, Yedlin is a very important person in the Sounders history. I just don't think he's a best 11 Sounders player. it'll be cool to see him here.
Yeah.
He's got a great, his whole vibe is fun. It would be, there is an interesting alternate history where if Yedlin were to have come to the Sounders now and we were this developed and MLS was where it was, seeing his trajectory, and because you could see a world where he doesn't necessarily need to go to Europe right away.
Right.
Yeah.
Like before, where it was immediate. Obviously, you're making that decision. But in that voting, you could vote for all three guys.
You can vote for all three guys.
Oh,
yeah. There's no limit on who you can vote for.
Yeah.
And so that's another thing. I think all three of them will get in. I just was just surprised when I heard a few people telling me, like people that I respect, saying like, I don't think I'm going to vote for Casey. And I do think that there's some element of people remember Casey almost more for his color commentating, and they sort of forgotten what a good player he was. I did too.
He was a lot like me, where he maybe sometimes he get a little bit over the top.
He was controversial, I think, is what people wanted him to be more of a homer than he was, and I just am not going to hold that against him.
Yeah, I still remember we had a couple of conversations with him in Mexico, right?
That's right.
In the rooftop. That was a good time. And yeah, man, the guy, he's real. And I like that, right? I mean, you're going to call it as it is or how you think it is. And I enjoyed it. The one guy that I had not a tough time, because again, I had heard from Brian Spencer about Jimmy Gabriel, but he was the only guy that I was like, I don't know.
I mean, I don't have a lot of personal interactions. I never saw him play. Mm-hmm. I'm just sort of going off of what everyone says.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. Enough research, and I obviously what I had heard from Brian, what I had heard from who doesn't come around here, another controversial guy.
Alan Hinton.
Alan Hinton. That'll be
an interesting test of this, is whether Alan gets nominated or even voted in.
He had told me some Jimmy Gabriel stuff. So yeah, but aside from that, I ended up voting for all three.
Yeah. Okay. Well, all right. Let's take a break. We're going to come back and we're going to talk, zoom out a little bit, talk about the U20 World Cup and the role that both Reed and Obed are taking, as well as talk a little bit about Obed Vargas winning the 22 or being put atop the list of the 22 under 22. You're listening to Sounder at Heart on the. No, you're listening to No Study at This on the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. Jeez. Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, which now includes No Study at This, Lobbing Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible through our paid subscribers. Plans start as low as $30 a year and allow us to remain independent and mostly ad-free. Subscribers get access to all our written and podcast content, including a full-text RSS feed and a mostly ad-free podcast feed that includes every show in one spot. If you really like what we're doing, though, I'd encourage you to sign up at our higher tiers, which include all sorts of various perks. The most popular of those is our members-only Discord, where the real Sounders sickos hang out. I know I've called this group the smartest, funniest, and best-informed Sounders fans in the world, but it's more than the rough equivalent of a Sounders Mensa meeting. Discord is where we make things happen, like for real. You know the promotion the Sounders ran that offered fans the opportunity to trade in their Messi jersey for a Paul Rothrock one? That originated in our community. You'll not only be the first to know about stuff, but you also have a semi-direct line to the movers and shakers at the Sounders organization. If you want to be one of the totally normal people who occupy the Sounder at Heart Discord, just become a supporter of Sounder at Heart. Anyway, thanks for listening, and go Durs. No Study at This, admittedly, is not exactly known for our spicy takes, but that doesn't mean we want our food to be mild. Spice up your life with Hacks and Ferments. Handcrafted in Georgetown and made with the best local ingredients from across the Pacific Northwest, they specialize in unique small batch fermented hot sauces and vinegars. Hacks and Ferments brings bold flavors and natural fermentation together for something truly special. Whether you're a heat seeker or just looking to elevate your cooking, you'll find something you love at hacksandferments.com. That's HAXANFERMENTS.com. And right now, if you use the code SOUNDERATHEART, that's all one word, at checkout, you will get a free hot sauce with your order. Again, go to hacksandferments.com, use the code SOUNDERATHEART at checkout for a free hot sauce with your order. Hacks and Ferments is a proud sponsor of the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. Welcome back to No Study at This on the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. All right, so both part of why the Sounders are shorthanded this week is because both Reed Baker-Whiting and Obed Vargas have continued to advance in the U20 World Cup. Both teams, both Mexico and the United States, are through to the quarterfinals of the U20 World Cup, which is itself a pretty cool accomplishment that two CONCACAF nations, both with Sounders players involved, are through to the quarterfinals, which is, I think this is the 5th straight U20 World Cup that the U.S. has gotten this far, but they've never gotten farther than that. That's correct, right?
I believe that's correct.
And so that's a pretty cool accomplishment. The difference this year is that both teams have gotten here by sort of bossing kind of traditional powers. The U.S. has beaten both France and Italy 3-0. Most recently, they beat Italy 3-0 in a game where, like, I didn't watch the whole thing, but everything I watched looked like they were just playing at a different level than Italy was, kind of in a similar situation as the France game, where the result ends up being a little kind to the United States because of the goals came so late, but they were the better team throughout. And then similarly, Mexico had this brutal group stage where they had Brazil, Morocco, and Spain, and they ended up finishing second, but they didn't lose any games. And then they just beat the crap out of the host nation, Chile. What have you made of Mexico's plan, this thing, and in particular Obed Vargas's?
Mexico is got one of their best generations that I've seen coming up. You know, there's the Marco Fabian era that they have some really quality guys, but in this one, they just seem to be at another level. I think that Gilberto Mora and Montiel are two guys that are going to be.
Yeah, Mora seems he's 16.
He's 16.
I mean, he's just like the best player on the field every game he plays. It's unbelievable.
He's incredible. Now, to be fair. Well, and I guess that's with all great players. Mexico plays for Gilberto Mora.
Okay, sure.
I think Obed Vargas has been sacrificed a whole lot to get these guys in better positions. I feel like a lot of times Obed wants to occupy the spaces that Mora takes because he has that ability to carry that space, right? But he sees it, and it's almost awkward to just watch him. Okay, I'm gonna get wide instead, or I'm just gonna hold back. But you could just see his mind. That's where I was going, man. I was gonna pick up the ball. One of the goals I want to say was against Spain. I'm telling you that if Obed Vargas was somebody else, he might fight more for that ball because he's right there, right? So I do think that Mexico this year has every chance. If they beat Argentina, which Argentina looks very good, the Inter Miami kid looks great up there. They have some quality guys. If they can get through Argentina, Mexico, it's a real deal. Their center backs, they're a little bit iffy. I think defensively they have some issues in that regard. I think when it comes to set pieces, man marking, they're just a little too aggressive at times and they get gappy. But Mexico's got a good quality team, specifically on the attacking end. I thought that not a lot of times, and maybe this is more at the U20 level. And let me add this. In South America, not a lot is put into the U20 tournaments for some reason. It's because usually your best talented players are already in Europe, right? They're in Italy, they're in England, they're in Spain, they're in Germany, and a lot of times they don't get to be part of that cycle. You're almost going with almost your B talented players sometimes. I think it's gotten a little bit better, but in this one, I thought that Mexico, Brazil, usually you don't expect Mexico to just go at Brazil. They went to go toe to toe with Brazil and against Chile. Look, Chile has been a disaster. I'll say that. I said that prior to this game. I thought that the only advantage that Chile had was that they were the home team, and that carries a lot of weight in the World Cup. Great crowd, great atmosphere, but there's just nothing brilliant about their team. There's just no magic there at all. They barely squeezed by the first round. And there's just no possession based soccer. It just doesn't have that Chile type of soccer. So Mexico, great. I think Argentina is a real parameter to see where they're going. But if they can get past Argentina, man, they could go all the way.
It has been interesting to watch Obed with Mexico because I think all of us at some point have expressed that Obed's above this level, and he's playing in this tournament sort of doing his doggies a little bit of like he's got to do some grunt work to get his opportunity with the first team. And because this team is built around Mora, Obed is very much the water carrier in that midfield, but there's also a lot of times where you see, if you pick any random point, watch Obed in one of these U20 games, and you will see Obed make a run with the ball at his feet that we have seen him make a bunch of times with the Sounders, where when he makes that run with the Sounders, he is getting support runs that are pulling players away, or guys are making runs so that Obed can pick them out. And Obed is making that run, waiting for players to make those support runs, and he's waiting and he's waiting, and those runs don't come. And there's not really anything for him to do at that point. And it's a little frustrating because like Obed by himself just created this opportunity and everyone was like, well, I wish he'd pass it to me. And instead of like doing something for him to pass it to them, they just stood there and waited, because some of that is also a stylistic difference of players coming up through Mexican academies versus the way there is a Mexican style that is distinct from the way the game gets played here or other places. And that's just a stylistic difference. But so if you look at Obed's stats from this tournament, they don't jump off. His FOTMOB rating is not spectacular. Right. And when you do have Mora and Montiel and
Dominguez,
there are guys who are popping statistically, but I don't think Mexico is in the quarterfinals if Obed's not there. Like, I think there is some degree
I agree.
They got some luck getting out of the group, but they also played Brazil and Spain dead even, two teams that Morocco beat pretty straightforwardly in a way that, to a certain degree, you make your own luck, where they were in a position where basically a result got them through and Morocco didn't need a result. So they were able to rotate and Mexico beat them. Like, you only get to play the team and the lineup that the other team puts out, and they beat that lineup. And then, they smoked Chile. The crowd was great. The pop when Chile got their one goal was fantastic, but Mexico were head and shoulders better. And now I think as you get into tougher games, these are games where I think Obed is going to have more opportunity to shine, because there are going to be those moments for an individual player to make a difference. And, he and Mora are very good friends. They are roommates when they play with, or when they go to U20 camps. I think there is the potential for that chemistry and that friendship to express itself in a game, very similar to, especially earlier in their Sounders careers, Christian Roldan and Jordan Morris, where that camaraderie and the chemistry, they're just going to look for each other in those moments. And when both players are that good, there's the chance for something really special to happen in a big moment.
And then the other Sounders player who's involved in this tournament is Reed Baker-Whiting. He has not had nearly the size of a role that Obed has. He's only started one of the 4 games, although I think he's gotten into all 4 games. I think he only played like 4 minutes against Italy, and he has looked okay. I think, depending on who you talk to, I think some people thought he was going to get a lot more minutes. I know one podcast I was listening to thought he might be a starter for the U.S. That has not really been the case. He's clearly sort of like the second tier. I do think on some level he's hurt a little bit by not having a position that he's really known for. I think he has played all over the field, even for the U.S. I mean, he can obviously play on either wing or as a fullback on either side. Same kind of thing he does with the Sounders. The U.S. More generally, though, has looked really good, and this is going to be a good test for them, because Morocco, I believe, is who they play in the quarterfinals. Morocco has at times looked like one of the better teams in the tournament, but they also have, they've also looked like a beatable team, kind of how all these U20 tournaments look like. I don't know how much we want to get into the U.S. since Reed has not had as much of a big role, but it has been kind of a cool feather in the cap for MLS in general. There's a lot of MLS players involved in this tournament, and it sort of shows the work that MLS has done to help kind of bolster the national team.
Yeah, Reed did not play in the 9-1 win against New Caledonia.
Right, okay.
And he came on in like the 84th against France and Italy.
Right.
I think, he played the full game against South Africa, which was their one loss.
Right.
But they were sort of in a...
They had already advanced. They'd already won the group at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Reed was not the cause of that result, but he also, because they heavily rotated, I think was doing a bit more of the cover work rather than really being influential going forward. I think he's looked okay, but he hasn't made, a really strong case to be the starter. I think if he was healthy and this tournament was happening a year ago, maybe he starts, but the guys who are ahead of him at fullback on both sides are all starters for their MLS teams. And one of them is, I think Frankie Westfield is the guy's name. He's starting on one side and he starts for the Union. Luca Bombino, who starts for San Diego, is also not a locked in starter with the US, and he's like an every game starter for one of the top teams in the West. I don't think it's that surprising that Reed has not locked in a starting spot. Nolan Norris, I think, is one of the other fullbacks who I believe is a starter for Dallas.
And has looked really good in this tournament, right?
Yeah. I don't think it's necessarily any fault of Reed's that he's not played more, but he also hasn't done anything magical to earn himself a starting spot, but he hasn't really had the opportunity.
And the system doesn't fit him to play at the winger position, in my opinion. And not to mention that the attacking guys on the wide ends, Gozzo being one of them, who has been very good, and then Campbell, the Dortmund kid. I mean, there's just a lot of talent there, and I don't even know if I would play Reed on a 4-3-3 that high up the field necessarily. So yeah, I just think that the system just doesn't quite work for him. So that's unfortunate, but at least he's there. He's battling it out.
Yeah, good experience for him at the very least. And one of the other things that we heard earlier this week, we talked to Henry Browner, and we'll kind of loop this into the discussion about Obed Vargas being getting the top spot in the 22 under 22, which is, I will say, it's kind of a funny thing because MLS has a Young Player of the Year award. And I guess this is just a way of sort of highlighting the depth of talent in this age group. But it is kind of it's like, given the status of the Young Player award, it just seems kind of maybe unnecessary at this point. It used to be. I don't even think it's sponsored. I don't think it was even sponsored.
No, not this year.
Yeah, so it's like that's even one. But it's regardless. I don't want to make too much light of the. It's a cool thing, a cool honor. But we got to talk to Henry Browner about this, and one of the things he mentioned is that he and Sean Henderson went to the U20 World Cup. They saw the whole group stage, and one of the things they took away from it was actually our youth setup stands up pretty good against some of these players. And one of the things he said is that we didn't see anyone there who was in our price range, notably, who we felt like was really an upgrade over Gomez, Hawkins, or Brunel, who are like the three kind of most age-appropriate type of players that they're comparing them to in terms of bringing in prospects. And I thought that was kind of interesting that, and because Browner, one of the things he said is like, we're always going to look internal before we go external. And this doesn't mean that they're not going to sign a U20, a U22 player this winter, but I do think it sort of does a good job of setting the bar of what they need to clear in order to feel like it's worth spending $2 or $3 million to bring in an outside player.
Yeah, and obviously there are U22 players that don't play this tournament,
right? And there's
that
older
are
players,
a lot better, right?
And the older players,
older players, of course. So let's go ahead and, because you're right about just adding that little bit, because our audience will go crazy if we're making it sound like the team is not gonna go out there and go find somebody. But it was interesting because he brings up a good point that there's been an investment that has paid off because we can all say that it's paid off. I always bring this up because Garth was the one who started that whole pathway into just putting a lot of money into the academy. And now you're getting players that consistently help your first team. And that sort of sustainability is as important as anything.
Right.
And so I like that they're going to look internally. But again, I don't think that he's saying we're not going to go out there and go find an attacker, which is the one area where maybe there hasn't been a lot of developing players for the Sounders.
Right. That said, Obed winning this 22 under 22 is a cool honor. He is the third Sounders player to have won it. Yedlin and Freddie Montero. Freddie Montero was actually the first one to win it in 2010. And for those first 5 or 6 years, maybe even longer than that, it was actually 24 under 24. So it was a bigger age group. But in the last few years where it's been more targeted towards younger players, in part because there are so many more younger players getting meaningful minutes. I mean, you look at that top 22, you look at that whole list, and everyone on that list played significant minutes. Reed Baker Whiting, for what it's worth, finished 23rd, ahead of Kevin Sullivan, who hilariously was getting some buzz for winning it last year, right after he signed to be with Manchester City. I think there's been some, he had a reasonably productive season at MLS Next Pro. Just kind of an interesting little note that he has fallen, the hype around him has fallen to the point where he's like, not really, people aren't trying to make it seem like he's the best young player in the league.
I think there's also an element with Kevin Sullivan of last year, he was just possibility. No one voting had seen him play
at all,
if we're being honest. And we are getting to a point where these players are playing real roles for their clubs, and the math of potential actual production, what are you doing for your team currently, like transfer potential, all of this stuff does lean a little bit more heavily on what are you actually doing right now and what have you done so far. And you have guys like Freeman and Vargas who are not just contributors, but are key players, written in ink starters for good teams. And Kevin Sullivan, Matt Doyle has talked about it on numerous occasions. When he plays in MLS, he does not look like an MLS player, but he's 15. He's a child. He should not look like that. Players who look like they belong at that age are anomalies, like Obed Vargas. And even he was like, he's a little guy, but he's got skills and he's not afraid of the moment. And those are 1 in a million traits to have at that age. I think it makes a little bit more sense that those rankings look the way they do this year, that Kevin Sullivan probably is still going to be a really good player, but he's not in reality a really good player at the MLS level yet. And that's what the voting is based on.
Right. And I think, and that's what I kind of like about, one of the things I like about this list, and I do think it does actually a good job of illustrating it, is that there's just a lot of young players in this league now that are getting real minutes.
Yeah.
There are, and that's the young Obed is actually one of the, I think he's the youngest player in 3 years to have won the award. He's 20. So he's got potentially another 2 years where I believe he's got 2 more years left, or at least one. He'd be eligible for sure next season. I don't know when his birthday is, so he might not be eligible next 2 years from now. But he's also a real academy product. That's the last few years. The players who have been winning this thing have been imports, and so I think he's only the 5th player to have won in the academy. A fun little note: the Sounders are one of only 2 teams to have produced whose academy has produced 2 winners of this award. DeAndre Yedlin being the other one. FC Dallas is the only team that has produced. FC Dallas's academy is the only other one that's produced multiple winners. I think they had 3, but they've had 5 players overall,
including current Sounder Jesus Ferreira.
Exactly. And the Sounders are also one of 2 teams that have 2 current players who won this. Do you know who the other one is? Little quiz game here. It's a kind of counterintuitive.
Is it Real Salt Lake?
It is not. It's the Columbus Crew, who neither one of those players were playing for them it's Darlington Nagbe, who is like the second or third winner, and Diego Rossi, who won it with LAFC. So kind of a.
What I like about this list this year is that, I don't know if I'm going to get heat for this. Being what is it? Being a guy that obviously wants talent from abroad being brought into the MLS, but it used to be kind of flooded by the Thiago Almadas and Velasco's and those players that come in, and it's great that they do that. But this year, Alex Freeman, Tocomari is a guy that comes out of MLS next. Owen Wolf, who's the guy that just been a revelation for us, and those guys are coming through the development system of MLS. And man, I think that's awesome. I think that's great for the league. I think it's great for U.S. soccer in general. And that's what really caught my eye this year. Aside from La Perla Martinez, who, he's been irregular necessarily. I mean, he's a good player and I get why he's there. But the other guys that are playing real minutes, like you mentioned, that are real key components of their teams, they're kind of gone through the MLS developing process, and that's great.
Yeah, it's and for the record, Kevin is actually 16. He just turned 16 like a week ago.
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday, Kevin! Don't come for us. But I mean, it is notable that if he was like Gilberto Mora is on the U20 Mexican national team, if Sullivan was, he could be on the U20 national team, and he's not. Not to. Like, look, he might be a great player. I just am still amused by the idea that there were people seriously asking if he should be near the top of the list last year, and it's like, no, he was 15-year-old.
I didn't even think about that. That you got Mora at 16.
I mean, that's Mora at 16 being, and I mean, we also saw Mora play against the Sounders here and he was a very good player. I mean, Mora is a special player.
He is.
I mean, he's getting genuine speculation that Barcelona might swoop him.
Yeah, I mean he's more as a phenom, a scary player for U.S. fans to have to worry about facing
for the next 20 years.
For the next 20 years, exactly. Like literally.
Yeah, it's tough.
All right. Well, on that really positive note, I don't think I have much else to say about the 22 or anything else. Of course. You can see Niko on Pulso Sports. You can find him on Soccer Down Here. You can find him on Lobbing Scorchers. And, of course, on Sounder at Heart. You can always read Tim Foss on Sounder at Heart. Thank you guys for doing this. Do you have something you want to say, Niko?
Yeah, just wanted to send my condolences and a message of support to Sean Henderson and Chris Henderson after the passing of their father. They had been dealing with that situation. They've been very, cautious with their dad. And, we've seen Chris here multiple times. And we just hope that they are together going through this difficult time. So it's a big positive message for them.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get out of here then. I'm Jeremiah Shan, signing off for Nos Adietes, which is part of the Sounder Heart Podcast Network. We will catch you next time.
Let's go Sounders. Yeah.